Good day, everyone. In this video, I want to discuss a topic that I've been receiving emails and SMSs and WhatsApps in the past when I still had WhatsApps over regularly. And this is people that contact me to say that they've received letters from their employers that states that they are mandating them to receive a vaccination. And I just want to cover with regards to the Department of Labor what their policy is with regards to this, because there's a lot of misunderstanding at the stage with regards to what their policy means and how it should be interpreted. And there's many firms around the country that have gone and taken action and sent out letters to their staff that mandates them to take a vaccination when maybe these people do not want to do so. And just to make clear, it's every person's own personal choice. And under our constitution and our law, there's certain things that people can look at for protection. And it's an individual choice at the end of the day. And I am all for freedom of choice. And this is what I try to protect as much as possible. And within the government website under the Department of Labor, there is a specific statement made, employment and labor on new direction with regard to vaccination in the workplace, where they give, where the employment and labor minister issues a new direction with regard to vaccination in the workplace. It's not a directive, it's a direction. And at the end of this specific direction, there is a contact person, Sabelo Mali, the media liaison officer to the minister, who I contacted. And I spoke to Sabelo, and he was in a meeting, and he very kindly actually took my call, spoke to me about a specific situation, and actually gave contact details for recourse, because this specific person had a deadline for Monday, by which time they would be dismissed. And there's been many similar situations in the past in larger corporations that could be resolved through employee and union interaction with the employer. And many of these have been resolved in that way in larger companies. Now, what about the smaller companies where there's maybe a manager in the company or director that just makes a decision and says that the department has actually gone and allowed mandating of vaccines, which they have not done directly? And if you actually go through this direction, it is clear that some smaller companies, with the letters that I've seen, and I've seen quite a few now, they abuse this, and even legal firms do so. And it's actually quite sad that that is the case, where they go and say that they can mandate this because they've come up with the operational policies, and for the health and safety of their staff, they are mandating vaccinations. And if you look at the end of this specific direction that the minister has given, there's two paragraphs here, and you can follow this link in the description below the video as well as in the first comment, where it says what is critical is that we need to balance the needs and to take the dictates of collective bargaining and the need to keep employees healthy and businesses running. The Labor Relations Act emphasizes the primacy of collective agreements. In other words, this is where people collectively agree on something instead of someone forcing something on someone. These guidelines are not intended as a substitute for collective agreements or agreed procedures between employers, their employer organizations, and trade unions, said Minister Nkesi. So you need to just keep in mind what is being said there. And then the last paragraph to me is the most important. It said this might include an adjustment that permits the employee to work off-site or at home or in isolation within the workplace, such as an office or a warehouse, or working outside of ordinary working hours. In instances of limited contact with others in the workplace, it might include a requirement that the employee wears an N95 mask instead of being vaccinated. So nowhere did the Department of Labor say that you have to mandate vaccinations. And it actually gives three points that you need to look at to make that decision within a company. And I think many people that are mandating vaccines did not follow these processes properly. And the intention of the Department of Labor was never for vaccinations to be forced on anybody. The minister made it clear that it will not be mandatory, will not be made mandatory, and so did the president of the country. So within the spirit of this, there's many articles that I can cover on the details of what this actually means. And I want to go through these 3 points here so that people understand how you should seek other alternatives than going and dismissing people. Because this is what is happening in certain instances now in the smaller companies where people are being threatened with dismissal. And then I want to advise you to go to the CCMA as fast as possible to find recourse, especially for these companies that misinterpret and actually have their own drive or mandate that they are trying to force on people when this is not the guidance that the department gave at all. The first point, it says, firstly, it must make that assessment taking into account an assessment of whether people should make vaccinations compulsory. Take into account the operational requirements of the workplace. This means that the direction does not make the vaccinations mandatory, but every employer must take into account its general duties under the Occupational Health and Safety Act 85 of 1993 to provide a working environment that is safe and without risk to the health of his employees and persons other than those in his employment who may be directly affected by his activities are not thereby exposed to hazards to their health or safety. Now, if you can work in isolation in an office, this should not apply to you because you can be isolated in an office. Secondly, if the employer decides to make it mandatory once the risk assessment has been conducted, it must then identify which of its employees will be required to be vaccinated. In determining whether an employee can be required to be vaccinated, the employee must identify those employees whose work poses a risk of transmission or a risk of severe COVID-19 disease or death due to their age or comorbidities. So it's telling you that you need to consider their age or comorbidities when you make that decision. In other words, not every person poses that risk. So if you're not posing that risk, you should not be included. For example, workers who work from home or whose work is such that they do not come into close contact, working contact with other workers or the public. So you can be at work and not come into close contact with people and then not be a risk. Thirdly, having identified the employees who are required to be vaccinated, it must amend its plan to include the measures to implement the vaccination of those employees as and when COVID-19 vaccines become available in respect of those employees, taking into account the guidelines set out in Annex C of the June 2021 version of the direction. And if you read those, other things needs to be made available. It makes it clear that you need to take other things into account. Like I mentioned earlier, that could include someone working from home or working in isolation in your office or wearing an N95 mask. There's many options that are laid out before you dismiss somebody for something like this. So if you are a business considering dismissing people because of the Department of Labor, I would consult them first. Maybe speak to the media liaisons officer, and he will be able to give you direction, because I think many people are completely missing what the department is saying. An employer may only make it an obligation once the employee becomes eligible under the program for vaccination and has been registered on the electronic vaccination data system and given a date for vaccination. Now, that is only if there's no other options. In other words, some people working with large crowds or whatever the case may be, and the risk of transmission is high according to guidelines that's given by the department. So all I'm saying to businesses out there is make sure that you have your ducks in a row. And all the interpretations that I've read by other law firms, etc., makes it clear that the moment you mandate a vaccine and you are willing to dismiss someone for not wanting the vaccine when there are other options available, you are stepping into an absolute melting pot, and you should avoid this at all costs, because the law is not on your side, and neither is the department, and the CCMA is going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. So consider what you are doing and whether this is within the spirit of our constitution, the current laws, as well as what the Department of Labor has actually laid out. So you can find the link to this below the video, to this specific section on the government website, as well as 2 other very good articles that you can read through that will give you guidelines. So anyone at this stage that has received any information from the employee that mandates them to take the vaccine, that have not gone through this process, they are violating what the department has put out there, and you are well within your rights to speak to your employer, because they were supposed to consult you. They cannot force you. And the other thing that you can do is go to the CCMA and seek recourse, and they will assist you in that matter. Thank you very much. Till the next video.